This episode is brought to you in part by Canderel. Coming soon, a luxury master-planned condominium community rising at the corner of Bathurst and St. Clair. Situated directly on the subway and streetcar line, a monument of architecture and interior design, a timeless expression of glamour and grace. Forêt Forest Hill. Register today at live@forêt.ca. That's live@FORET.ca.
It became clear, I think, to everyone involved and everyone in the community that this was a much bigger thing than we anticipated, that this wasn't just a couple students, dropping in here and there, that, there'd be over 100 students for a Friday night dinner young.
That's Harley Finkelstein, the president of Shopify, speaking about his new philanthropy project in downtown Ottawa. 4 years ago, the Canadian Jewish entrepreneur and philanthropist and his wife, Lindsay Taube, donated $500,000 to build a Chabad student center in the place where Finkelstein himself used to go when he was a law student at the University of Ottawa. Now he's the head of an online e-commerce company that's worth $53 billion, and Finkelstein's upping his pledge to help renovate the building he bought that now has his name on it. The Chabad Centre's on Friel Street. It's just a 3-minute walk from where the old Ottawa Jewish Community Centre used to be on Chapel Street for 50 years, until 1998, when the community moved to the suburbs and established itself away from the historic downtown. Finkelstein believes it's important to bring back a visible Jewish presence right near Parliament Hill and the ByWard Market and Ottawa U.
We thought it'd be a place where students would stop by, that would have events and would have some, Jewish programming, and obviously would host Shabbat and Shabbos dinner and high holidays. But we pretty much figured out right away that this was something way more than that. This was becoming a magnet of Jewish life in Ottawa.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Tuesday, June the 21st, 2022. Welcome to the CJN Daily, sponsored by Metropia. Harley Finkelstein's company lost about 70% of its value so far this year on the stock market because investors are worried about inflation and the recession slowing down online shopping. His e-commerce company provides the web platforms for hundreds of businesses. But Finkelstein's people told us he didn't want to talk about that. He wanted instead to focus solely on why the thing he's most proud of so far in his life, at age 38, is donating $2 million to help his old mentor, Rabbi Chaim Boyarsky, create a space for young Jewish people in downtown Ottawa. Coming up, Finkelstein will be here, along with the CJN's Alex Rose, who's been covering the story. But first, here's what's making news elsewhere in Canada right now.
אני גלי בר-זיו בטורונטו, וככה נשמעים החדשות היהודיות מטורונטו.
If you were listening to our episode from last Halloween in October, you may remember we interviewed a Jewish couple who work in the horror industry as producers and a reporter. And our episode was called Halachic Halloween, and we talked about why there are so few scary Jewish movies. Well, one of the guests, Jonathan Barkan, has been picked to be a judge for a new horror festival, and he had to help select the top 13 finalists. Each of the films is 60 seconds or less, and at least one of the filmmakers is Jewish. She's Megan Llewellyn of Durham, North Carolina. If horror is your thing, and it sure is the thing of our producer Victoria Redden, which is why she's all over this story, then you can watch the films in the 13 Minutes of Horror Festival in August. They'll all be on the streaming service Shudder, which is available in Canada through Apple TV or Amazon Prime or directly through AMC+. And joining us now is Harley Finkelstein from Ottawa and CJN reporter Alex Rose from Toronto.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's my first time being on a CJN podcast in 2 years. It's good to be back.
You founded the darn things years ago. You were the pioneer. So
yeah, me and Michael,
I'm walking on your shoulders.
So, Harley, I was just saying we first spoke a few years ago when you were doing your initial donation to found that Jewish Community Centre in Ottawa. And so I know obviously you're going to be adding to that, but before we get to the new donation, can you just tell us what the result of the first stage was?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So as hopefully some people remember, because you initially sort of broke that story, I think, Alex, when we first did it. I moved from Montreal to Ottawa in 2005 to go to law school, not to become a lawyer, but to become a better entrepreneur. But when I got here, I had no friends, I had no family here. But every Friday, this young, very unpolished rabbi at the time named Chaim Bayarsky would come and visit me in the law school. And I'm not especially observant, not especially religious, but I certainly do believe in the Jewish tradition, and the Jewish identity is a big part of my life. My grandparents are Holocaust survivors. I was raised Jewish, and very much so. And so every Friday, this rabbi would come to visit me, and he knew that I wasn't religious. He knew that I wasn't observant, but he would just come and ask me if I'd want to wrap tefillin with him, and I would. I said yes. He would often say, do you want to go do this in a small classroom somewhere? And I said, no, let's do it in the auditorium in front of, in the middle of the school. And I think he always got a good laugh at that. But him and I became close, and I would look forward and anticipate these Friday visits. And eventually we got to know each other well enough. He said, why don't you come join me for Shabbos dinner at my home with my family? And so I began to go to Rabbi Chaim's house pretty much, every Friday, every second Friday for Shabbos dinner. And what I initially was blown away by was the amount of people that were there. I mean, you'd walk into this house and there would be students sitting on the stairs, sitting on the floor, sitting at the table. There would be students everywhere. I would ask, what is going on? Is this a special event? And he would say, no, this is what it is every Friday night. And so it became quite obvious to me that this was a very special human being, a very special rabbi, a very special community leader who brought students together in his home. But this thing wasn't scaling very well. And this is back in 2006 or 7. I mean, I was a poor law student. I sort of joked and said, one day if I ever have enough money, I'd love to help you build and buy a real building and build a real congregation community center. It was a total throwaway comment. It was just something that I thought was a nice thing to say. But lo and behold, around 2017 or so, I called him. I was at Shopify now at that point for almost 7 or 8 years. We'd gone public a couple of years earlier. We were, we weren't, today I think we're the second largest company in the country after the Royal Bank. But at the time we were much, much smaller. But I was in a position where I thought I'd be able to help. And so I called him and said, Rabbi Chaim, do you remember that comment I made to you about buying a building one day for you and actually moving to a permanent space and out of your home, but actually having a real Jewish community center here in Ottawa in downtown? And he said, I do. And I said, I think I'm ready to do that for you.
So it sounds like you're surprised, right, by the immediate reception and the really strong reception. So what do you think that means in terms of, because people are bemoaning the decline in Jewish engagement among young people, but here you have an example of the uptake being way higher than you expected.
There's this great anecdote. I believe it was the Stanford campus in Palo Alto on University Avenue. I may be getting this wrong, and anyone listening, please feel free to find me on Twitter or email me and tell me that I was wrong. But I think it was the Stanford campus. When they were initially building their new campus, they set up a bunch of buildings, and the architect or the architectural team said, well, here's where we want the paths to be between these buildings. And it'll go from building A to building B to building C, so on and so forth. And someone on that team said, do not make any paths. Let's wait a year or two. Let's see where the grass is missing. And then we should build the paths where the grass is missing, meaning we should be a lot more open-minded. We should be a lot more flexible. And rather than dictate how to get from building A to building B, let's see what is happening organically. And that, I think, is the key to this entire story, is that we didn't necessarily have a set in stone policy or strategy or design for what this building would be. It was, let's just put a building here. Let's invite any Jewish student, Jewish young person, or anyone for that matter, who needs a place to go or wants to, get themselves deeper into Jewish life and Jewish tradition and Jewish community. And let's see how it gets used.
Did you expect when you made the initial donation that you'd be coming to this point?
I told Rabbi Chaim, and he agreed. But I was like, we have to put a big sign here that says, this is a Jewish community center in Sandy Hill. Even though this building had not been renovated, we had a big sign in front, a massive sign that said Jewish Community Center. And there was of course risk to that, security risk being one of them. But I felt the risk was worth it because, first of all, it was managed. We know it's a very safe community. But what it did was it sort of metaphorically opened its arms and invited people into it.
Can I jump in for a sec, Alex? Being an Ottawa person myself, half of my family's from Ottawa, originally born and bred, and went to Carleton. And there was the Friel Street Jewish Community Center for generations, a little farther down. And then, of course, because of the communities moving out to the West End, it closed, and then Rito Bakery closed. So basically, slowly, there's like very few Jewish merchants left in the ByWard Market. As far as I know, this, would be maybe a resurgence to what that part of Ottawa was historically by bringing Jewish life back to it.
Your point is really interesting, because one of the things that I thought was strange when I moved here in 2005, that the major synagogue that serviced downtown and sort of, the major, I guess, city center of Ottawa which was on Chapel Street, had closed just as I moved here. And so there actually wasn't a major community center or a center of Jewish life in downtown Ottawa. Now, earlier on, I mentioned that we are a G7 capital. The reason that I mentioned that was because, as a proud Canadian Jewish person, as a proud Canadian entrepreneur, I actually felt like I didn't like that. That didn't sit well with me. That, okay, our G7 capital does not have a prominent Jewish center in its downtown core. That is not right. There's a great community here. The West End has done a great job around Center Point, and there's sort of pockets of different areas, but the downtown core needs to have something meaningful. And so I think that initially drove the purchase of the building, but it was really the students and their use of it that drove the fact that, we decided to, I went from a $500,000, investment donation to now what is now $2 million. That was on the basis of demand. It seemed like there was pent-up demand for something that was bigger than we initially anticipated. And I've never been accused of being lacking ambition. That with my business, but that's also with the community and the philanthropic things that my family and I do.
You mentioned that you're giving, or Alex mentioned your second donation, but you have the community responsible for raising double or almost double, or 3.7 million more. So with Roger Greenberg and all these people who are helping on that fundraising campaign. So how is that going?
So once we sat down and Chaim and I discussed this, we said, there's a real thing happening here that we didn't anticipate. And I said, I think it's important that we bring in some people who are far deeper roots into the community than I do. And the first call that I made was Ian Shabinsky. And if you know the Ottawa sort of Jewish community story very well, the Shabinsky family have been part of this community for a very, very long time. They sort of were pillars of the community. And Ian's someone that I really look up to as a mentor, and he's an amazing human. And then Jules Sigler, who is not only sort of comes from the real estate community and understands construction, but same thing. I think his family came here 100 years ago, and they've been pillars of the Jewish community. And so I asked Jules and Ian if they would meet me. We met at the Jewish Center, and I said, look around. This is something that I think this is already something really great, but I think there's this sort of 10x opportunity. And Ian said, Harley, let us know what you feel comfortable doing. And Lindsay and my wife and I committed to an additional 1.5 million. And then Ian said, let me go and raise the rest in the community, because I don't think this is no longer just a university student Jewish community Chabad thing. This is now a Canadian, Jewish building, and this is something that will help the Jewish community across the country, and especially here in Ottawa. And it's been amazing because, I do not have the network that Ian and Jules do. I do not have the experience in building and construction that Jules has. And so one of the things that we've done is we've sort of enrolled the rest of the Ottawa Jewish community in this project, and it's been amazing. I mean, the response has been incredible.
Are people? I know it says on the website that people are now down the street somewhere else because they're in the middle of renovations, right? Do we have a date for the ribbon cutting?
We're hoping, when the semester starts, we're hoping to be in there.
And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of the CJN Daily, sponsored by Metropia, integrity, community, quality, and customer care. Today's listener shout out goes to Marilyn Sinclair in Vaughan, Ontario. And we'll end the show with a reminder that if you want to be sure and receive the new edition of the CJN magazine, which is now at the printers, go to the CJN Circle and subscribe. And you can save double high, that's $36 off the regular price, if you use the promo code CJN Daily when you pay. That's at the CJN Circle, and the link is in our show notes.